So next up, I believe we have some of our ECE friends that are going to be providing some knowledge for our viewers. Yes, at 11 o'clock, we have ECE Behavior Part 3. And so we are going to be welcoming our friends Ann Gooden and Laura Ferguson to join us and give us some behavior strategies for our ECE community. And as Susan and Suzanne pointed out, some of the strategies that we have for ELs and ECE students are also beneficial for our students that aren't ECE and EL. I love the scaffolds that they provide, and a lot of this stuff that we talk about during these sessions can be used for other learners as well. So I see Ann is here with us. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you. We're happy to be here. All right. If you're ready, we'll go ahead and get started.
I am so ready. Let's go.
All right. Good deal. Just want to remind everyone that we do have a few folks from the ECE team working the chat. So if you have questions as we go, we will do our best to answer those questions. So don't hesitate to put those in the chat. We also helps us know what we may need to provide with future trainings as well. So please use the chat box if needed. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can see it, Annie.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just want to make sure it's visible to everybody. So today we're going to talk about progress monitoring and behavior strategies. So some of this you'll see if you've been on a lot of these trainings. Some of the slides may look familiar, but we're always trying to add more and different resources to help you with individual situations or just in general with all your students. So we're going to talk first about data collection and progress monitoring. So just some things to make sure that you consider when with regards to data collection and progress monitoring. First being the method of measurement. So obviously all of our IEP goals have a designated method of measurement, possibly a couple of methods of measurement. But as you're looking at individual student goals, you want to be asking yourself, will it work? Will that method of measurement work for NTI? Do I need to adjust it at all? And if adjustments need to be made, I need to make sure I'm documenting that. So we'll talk a little bit more. We've got some slides from our special education co-op trainings that have happened at the state level that we'll look at that a little bit more in just a moment. What works best for the parent if they're helping to complete documentation? So we talked about this a little bit last week. There may be some opportunities to take data virtually, but then also if we're relying on parents to help us with that, we need to work with them and make sure that we're making it as user-friendly as possible for what the parent is able to help us with. So we want to make sure we're having those conversations with them. Check-ins. You want to develop a schedule with the student and parent. So I don't want to just call willy-nilly from time to time. It would be best, if possible, to have a schedule with the parent to say, okay, once a day at this time, I'm going to call. Or if it's a couple times a week, maybe I don't need to do a daily check-in with the student. Maybe I can work out with the parent checking in a couple times a week, or maybe it's even just once a week, but they're providing us some other feedback in another way. But I do want to make sure, or it would be best practice to develop a schedule with that parent so that they know when to expect phone calls. Because again, they may have multiple kiddos, and I think it's best if we can make that schedule with them. And then we've had lots of questions. Do I still need to graph progress data? The answer to that is yes. We have to continue to graph progress data in accordance with the frequency stated in the goal. So if it says that we will graph it twice weekly, which is what majority of our behavior goals have in there, then we need to make sure that we are continuing to do that. Okay. So this graphic comes straight from the Special Education Regional Cooperative webcast series, so via KDE. So if you go to this PowerPoint and want to actually see that webcast, you can click on the link there when we get finished here, and you can watch their webcast on data collection. So I'm going to go through each of these individually, the yes, somewhat, and no on the next couple slides, but wanted you to kind of see the whole graphic with regards to, they're looking at, are the methods of measurement I'm using in the classroom going to continue to be effective during NTI days? If the answer to that is yes, we're going to continue collecting and analyzing the data as you were, okay? So again, the whole point of keeping that data is to, look at student progress. So some additional considerations. Is the student making progress during NTI with the specially designed instruction that I'm providing? Do I have a plan for collecting progress data for students with digital access and for students without digital access? So I want to make sure by now, I think probably most of you are aware with families whether or not they have digital access or not. And so you do want to keep in mind methods for both and have ideas for both. So this website also gives some additional ideas for that. Okay. If your answer is somewhat, so maybe maybe your method of measurement can be utilized for maybe some students, or you may need to make some minor adjustments to it. You want to, it may just mean that the question or what you're monitoring looks a little bit different. For example, if it is, if you were tracking staying in area for the student at school, well, that may look a little different at home, because staying in area, obviously, we don't have to sit in one spot or in one designated location all day at home. So for that, for example, I may need to adjust that a little bit to be maybe just remaining seated during work completion for NTI, or maybe it's staying seated at the dinner table, that sort of thing. So it may just may need a little bit of minor adjustment. Okay. But we do want to make sure, again, if we're making any adjustments, that we're documenting that. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But there's several NTI documents that we have linked through our guidance document that are helpful with places to document those adjustments. Okay. And then if the answer is no, if the method of measurement is not going to work at all, it's maybe an access issue, maybe the students are unable to gather, or maybe you are unable to gather products from the student, ask yourself, is there another way to gather the data? So I may need to develop a completely different form and ask the parent to help with gathering that data. Okay. If the student if I'm not doing any virtual face-to-face with the student, then obviously I'm going to have to rely on parent to provide me some documentation. So I work that out with the parent. I'm making sure that every step of the way I'm documenting any adjustments that are being made. Okay. How do I progress monitor behavior goals? So I want to, obviously, if I'm doing virtual lessons, then I'm going to be able to observe some behaviors during those virtual lessons and complete that method of measurement as you would in a school setting when possible. So, that is probably one of the best ways if we're able to do those virtual trainings. If I'm unable to collect data virtually, then I want to work with the parent and student maybe to develop a monitoring form, or maybe I'm using a similar one to what I was using in school, but I've adapted it for the parents. and I'm asking them to complete that at home, and we'll look at some examples of those in a few minutes. But I want to make sure, again, that I'm documenting any adjustments that I'm making to the method of measurement or how the data is collected. Some examples of ways to collect data with the parent or student might be a type of point sheet or sticker contract. So that's one option. The self-monitoring form, which we'll look at, check-in, check-out form, all of those, can be tailored to fit the needs of individual students. And I'm looking at trying to make it as closely related to what I was doing while we were in a brick and mortar building, but obviously it may look a little bit different based on the behaviors and what they're monitoring within the home setting. I also want to work with the parent and student on rewards or incentives that I can earn at home. I've gotten the question a couple of times, I think, about, what do we do about situations where we have parents who are adamant that behaviors don't happen at home. They don't see the same behaviors at home that we see at school. What I would ask the parent to do is say, great, this is a great time then to focus on those positive behaviors and reward those positive behaviors so that the student is seeing that positive behaviors at home earn me rewards, and then we can again hope to carry that through when we're back in a school setting. But great time for parents to work on that positive reinforcement with students, and really, using specific praise with the student. I love the way you are, staying in your seat and completing all of your work, and they're earning, stickers on their sticker sheet or things of that nature. And then they're earning those incentives frequently, so that they are, it's a reminder to them that positive behavior, earns me positive things. And it's just time to sort of bolster that self-esteem and that feeling that they can do schoolwork positively, and there's a positive result for completing it. So perfect time to do that, especially for those kiddos that maybe don't have as many behaviors at home. And then obviously we already talked a little bit about this, but continuing to graph the data based on the IEP goal. So twice a week, if that's what the goal states, then I should still have 2 data points, twice a week. I'm making note in my progress monitoring document, though, that this data was collected during NTI, so that we make sure that there is, if there is a noticeable difference, either good or negative, that we make sure it's documented that this is during NTI, which is obviously a different situation. And then at the bottom there, you'll see that there are some, there is a link to some additional progress monitoring tools that I think can be helpful. I think we think of monitoring sheets and point sheets and things of that nature, but then there's also frequency counts that we could ask a parent to use. There's other forms there that are pretty user friendly. Okay. Some point sheet samples. So this is just an example of something I might use with a younger student. Sometimes we work with students on, green choices and red choices, and, green is a positive choice, red is a negative choice. So these are just some examples of how I might set up a sheet and just ask the parent. Sometimes they can utilize their phones or something of that nature to, or an iPad to, color those in, or they could really just put a check mark in what would be the red or green box if they need to. But again, if I was using a red and green, positive, negative choices with a student, I can still utilize that in the home setting, but it may just need to be adapted a little bit. You'll notice the one on the left is for daily point sheets. So morning, afternoon, evening. So it may be that we break the day down into some different parts, or we may just ask the parent, to take just during the time they're doing their schoolwork, we'd like you to take this data, or just once a day, if you can mark for us how the day went overall. So you'll see the one on the right there is a weekly point sheet. That may work better for the parent. Again, I'm talking with the parent to make sure that I'm making this as user-friendly for them, and what they might require as far as, the amount of time that they have to spend on helping us with that data. Okay. So that's one example. Here's some self-monitoring examples. The one on the left, you'll notice is, made, and I could change this instead of self-monitoring for the student. I could ask the parent to complete this. So it may be that the student is completing it. It may be that the parent is completing it. It could be that they're both giving it to me. But you'll notice, like, for example, I've got 3 columns there all of the time. Some of the time I need to do better. They could simply put a check mark in there, or it could be used as a sticker chart, or a star, something of that nature. If I were using this, obviously, to collect data for the student, all of the time might be 2 points. Some of the time, 1 point. I need to do better, 0 points. We would want to talk the student through, what does it mean to be all of the time, some of the time, and I need to do better. But that's how I can take this monitoring form and then create data out of it. So for all of the time they got, it would be 2 points. For all of the ones marked some of the time, 1 point. And then if I need to do better, 0 points. And then I could do the math and figure out their points for the day, and a percentage there. The one on the right, just a little bit different. And I will say that I adapted this. I have an EBD teacher, Miss Holly at King, who created this form earlier this year, a little bit different version of this. She had it broken down throughout the day, but if I was just doing a once a day daily chart with the student, and the parent or teacher, I could utilize this virtually. If I'm doing virtual face-to-face lessons with the student over the computer, I could be the one as marking the teacher part, or maybe I'm asking the parent to help complete this with the student. So you can see there, like on Monday, did the student use kind words? Did they keep their hands to themselves? Did they complete their work? I could change that scale if I need to, and do a 0, 1, 2, a 0, 1. It really just depends on the needs of the student. But those are linked there so that you can adjust them as you need to for a student. Okay. Reward menus. Work with the parent to establish a reward system. So here's just a couple of examples here of reward menus. I think it's great if we can still provide those visual supports, even if parents the one following through with the reward. Figuring out, we may need to do a new reinforcement inventory or talk with the parent about what's available at the house. What does the student enjoy doing at home? And we can tailor that reward menu to the things that the student enjoys doing within the home. And we want to, we may also need to walk parents through, what does this look like? How many times a day? Based on that point sheet or monitoring sheet you're using, when do they earn rewards? What do they need to do to earn those rewards? Okay. Just a little more on data collection. Again, if you've participated in any of these other virtual trainings, you've seen this slide. This comes straight from our compliance guidance document that's been created to help our schools with regards to ECE compliance during NTI. But we do want to make sure that we are documenting everything. You'll see there in the blue are some examples, and we'll look at one in just a second, but some examples of where or how I can document the SDI that I'm providing. And I want to make sure that any adjustments that I'm making, this would be a good place to make sure that I am documenting that. And how the student is responding to that. And then, of course, any conversations, this is a good place to document those conversations with parents. This is going to document my specially designed instruction, the lessons that I'm doing with students, any accommodations or modifications I'm making, but that isn't going to give me goal data. I do need to utilize some of the previous forms we just looked at, whether it's point sheets, where I'm doing virtual lessons with a student and I'm documenting behavior, or I'm asking parent to document that behavior. That's going to give me my goal data. Okay. So here's just an example of this form here where it says case CEC example. That is what you're going to see here. And this is just an example of one that we've done for behavior. So we make sure we include the delivery method service provided. So I can do this for every goal the student has. So if it's just behavior goals, then I would, for this individual student, I would just put behavior. But if they also have a reading goal, math goal, writing goal, I can put documentation for each goal on here separately. So I would create one of these forms for each student on my caseload. And then you can't see it on here, but on the very left-hand side of this document is a place to put the date. So each day I'm going to update this form. But, the SDI provided direct instruction in a replacement behavior using a designated cool-off area when upset or frustrated. That may look different, of course, in the home setting, but we need to work students through, okay, we're at home. What does that look like? Where can you go? And then we note the accommodations or modifications, use of technology, emailed a copy of the student's 5-point scale to the parent. Obviously, that's a form we would have used in the school setting previously, or I've done some lessons virtually with the student with regards to that. But I want to make sure the parent has that. Any unique tailoring, if I had to make adjustments, this is a good place to make sure that I am documenting any adjustments that are having to be made because of NTI. Okay. And then student response and any notes. So just general information that maybe doesn't fit under one of those other categories, I can include that under notes. So I am going to now turn this over to Laura so that she can share about behavior strategies.
All right. Good afternoon, guys. I'm going to share my screen now. All right. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
All right. All right. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit for these last couple of minutes about behavioral strategies. All right. So as Annie talked about, I just wanted to cover some of those strategies that Annie kind of covered this morning, but also really think about as a teacher or as a parent, kind of what these tasks can look like. Because as we know, like Annie said, we've had parents that reach out to us and tell us that my child doesn't engage in these behaviors at home. But we really want to think about for our students, what could some of these behavioral strategies look like, and how could we simplify them for parents and teachers as we're navigating that virtual world, and parents are also navigating that kind of teacher and support world. So some of the things that Annie touched on, and I'm going to follow through with, is just think about setting clear objectives. It's so important to make sure that we remind families, and, with a lot of my families, I've kind of sent some tip sheets and some things to help them, but reminding them to make sure the student knows exactly what is expected. I think a lot of times with our students, we know as educators that people make assumptions. So making sure they know exactly what is expected of them and the directions are clear and precise. If we just present things to them and say, okay, finish this, as we know, the student may get overwhelmed with the task size, the items that we're asking them to do. They may see it and think it's too difficult. So then behaviors may arise. So we want to think about making sure those objectives and those targets are clear and precise. Also making sure that the targets are attainable. If we have something that is a long-term...
Hey, Laura, can I interrupt you for a second? Can you
Yes.
hover over your slide for me when at the bottom, the menu should come up right there. There we go. And then will you click on captions for us, please?
Okay.
You just click on the button. You don't have to choose what text size or anything. Yeah, there we go. That way we can get some close.
I thought I had it up. My apologies.
No, that's fine. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And so then we want to make sure that we make those targets attainable. I know that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks breaking down or chunking tasks, but that is so important as well. Think about the student in your classroom, and now the parent may be sent this whole large activity for them to do, reminding parents or you as a teacher saying, hey, we're going to do these first 3 items, and then next we're going to come back to this. And also starting with those mastered skills, warming them up with something that they already have if you're meeting virtually, or remind the parent, hey, you want to start with some easy problems before we move to more difficult issues or target behaviors that we want to think about. And also think about offering choices for our students. Oftentimes our students at ECE may feel like, oh, this is what is expected of me. I don't have any other choice, but offering those choices, what they want to do first, what order they want to do the task in, when they want to take their break, just thinking about all those opportunities as now we're navigating working from home. We're having more choices of how we kind of set up our day, offering that with instruction and reminding parents that this is okay and may be a great way to target behaviors for those students. Making sure, like Anne said, to reinforce those appropriate and replacement behaviors. Make sure that we're not always constantly redirecting. I've worked with families and, families have reached out and I've been like, well, remember, I know that our students, are used to being in a classroom, being, right with the student, modeling student behavior and peer behavior. But right now they don't, they might not have that peer behavior to model off of. So making sure we're not just constantly redirecting our students or making that a tip for families as well. They may think the redirections are helpful, but it may be overwhelming to our students. Also modeling those behaviors you would like your student to display. So if they have those strategies we've discussed, like break cards or 5-point scale, modeling that for them if you're with them virtually, or telling parents to model that for them. You can model what taking a break looks like, asking for help, taking turns, those types of strategies. And one of the ways that I always talk with teachers, but also maybe reminding families or you as a teacher, if you're working virtually, to go over the expectations and rules before they start. We make assumptions sometimes that students are always aware that I should sit and take turns and learn. But if you can go quickly over, hey, we're going to work, we're going to do it for 5 minutes. If you have questions, ask me this. But that's always something that I think we assume our students and children know, but that might be something, just a great tip to be like, hey, go over the 3 rules real quick and then get started. Breaking down those days, the day may be scheduled, the requirements may be scheduled, but thinking about where breaks may go and where you can put them if you're teaching virtually, or reminding parents, hey, don't wait for your child to get overwhelmed. Make those breaks. If math's difficult or if English ELA is difficult for your student, maybe schedule those breaks in between those. And check in with the students. Annie showed some check-in systems. We talked about check-in systems last week, but asking students, what do you feel like? Are you overwhelmed right now? How can I help you? Checking in before and after, just to remind them that, if there are things that we need, we can talk through those and provide them the next time you begin instruction. Also, when working with the students on the behavior planner goes, remember to focus on those replacement behaviors. But like Annie said, work on replacement behaviors regardless of the target behavior. So, for example, if you have a student who engages in aggression, but you may not see that in the home, make sure, even if we're a 5-point scale or a break is what we're doing to replace those inappropriate behaviors, we're still focusing on that in virtual instruction or with the families. You know, I can work on a 5-point scale, and it's great that we're working on it to teach them that when the target behavior is not occurring. And like Annie said, praise and reinforce often during teaching session when replacement behaviors occur, but also in the absence of those target behaviors that we want to decrease. So, you know, if the student is complying with instruction, you know, reminding you as a teacher, really praising or reinforcing the student, but also telling the parent, hey, if you see him on task, praise that behavior. So we'll see that happen more often. And,
hey, Laura.
You know, yes.
Hey, Laura, it's Melissa. I am so sorry to interrupt you, but our time is up, and this has been valuable information.
Okay.
And I just want to remind everybody that the slides that Laura and Annie were presenting today are linked on the schedule, and that we will be back tomorrow at 11 o'clock with Julie Donnellan and SDI and progress monitoring.
All right. Thank you, guys.